We're talking about tomorrow as the start of the road to recovery. The senior sources have said to me throughout the day that they're seeing it as one of the most important days in the government's, the nation's response to COVID, because it's going to set out the framework, 3 steps that the states can adopt at different times, but with one shared ambition. We're talking probably July. The PM mentioned that during the week, July would be the goal for a COVID-safe economy. So a shared ambition, but the states can take their own pace on the 3 steps to get there, those easing of restrictions, Andrew.
Yes, so being described in federal government circles as a landmark day. The PM certainly last week built up this day tomorrow. So let's see if the National Cabinet can deliver. As Prime Minister Scott Morrison, he's attempting to get National Cabinet to get moving on lifting restrictions tomorrow. But ultimately, the power, as you just identified, Kieran, rests with the states, and New South Wales and Victoria are balking at it. Perhaps you saw a reason for that with those case numbers, active case numbers you showed earlier. In short, Scott Morrison cannot tell the states what to do. It's been put to me the PM is actually keener on a resolution on restaurants and cafes going back tomorrow than on people going back to the workplaces, because that will do more for the economy. That will get more people in jobs. We already have people working from home and still able to operate in the economy. But there is little likelihood at this point of New South Wales or Victoria setting a time frame at the moment on reopening such businesses. What we'll get tomorrow is these principles and the steps, as you put it. The most likely outcome tomorrow is a statement of principles for what should happen, and South Australia and Western Australia opening up. We know, which is important, of course. We know the Northern Territory already is. Also, I'm told, don't expect a resolution on gyms. The recommendation of the National Cabinet tomorrow is to allow gatherings of 10 up from 2, to allow 5 people to attend your house for Mother's Day, for example. We know Anastasia Palaszczuk has already announced that in Queensland, but Daniel Andrews and Gladys Berejiklian are balking at it. Seems a bit absurd, over the top. Well, one of the reasons Gladys Berejiklian is being cautious is there is a plan to get New South Wales public schools back full-time in 2 weeks' time. In week 5 of the term, students go back 1 day a week next week, and 2 weeks later she wants them back full-time. Now, why does that matter in the context of other restrictions? Berejiklian is concerned that should there be outbreaks when other things open up at the same time as schools, that pressure will come on to shut the schools again, and she doesn't want to see that. It was Scott Morrison who raised the expectations around tomorrow last Friday when he talked about Australia having an early mark. Let's have a listen.
Australians have earned an early mark through the work that they have done, and that decision will now be made on next Friday.
One state government source said to me of Mr Morrison, absolutely he wants us to open things up as quickly as possible, but he should remind himself of when there were hundreds of new cases a day. Let's hear from the different premiers and their different approaches now on this from this morning. Anastasia Palaszczuk, more willing to ease restrictions, it seems, for Mother's Day than Gladys Berejiklian or Dan Andrews.
I just want to manage expectations and say even if National Cabinet does suggest easing of restrictions, which New South Wales will consider very carefully, they won't be able to be made in time for Mother's Day. So the existing arrangements will be there.
I've got no announcements to make about restrictions, any restrictions. I can tell you what I'll be doing on Mother's Day. I will not be visiting my mum, even if it was lawful for me to do that.
Because Queensland has been doing such a great job, from Sunday we will be allowing up to 5 members to visit a household right across Queensland. So that is great news for families. It must be from the same household.
Scott Morrison wanted to talk about an early mark because he wants to encourage the states as much as possible to open things up, Kieran. I do think some of the reluctance here is around some of the media stories around the Ruby Princess scandal and the scandal in Victoria around the meatworks the Victorian opposition is calling Victoria's Ruby Princess. The state governments are concerned about flack when it comes to opening things up and more outbreaks occurring. But the Prime Minister is absolutely right when he says we've tackled the health curve, we have to tackle the economic curve now, and Sky News, we've already revealed how hotels and restaurants have provided plans on how that can happen in a COVID-safe economy.
And you can see why the government, the federal government, wants to get these things moving. I mean, it's the states obviously putting in charge of the restrictions. It's the federal government picking up the bill, is the way one senior government source put it to me over the last day or so. And the other issue, Andrew, if you look at, let's look at how much money's going out the door. Treasury officials are saying these are record amounts. 25 billion in the last 4 weeks, another 30 billion over the next month. There was $1 billion. It was confirmed the payments of JobKeeper did start as planned yesterday, and $1 billion went out on day one. And so you can see part of the reason why the federal government is feeling it enormously at the moment. This huge shutdown is having a massive impact, not to mention the amount of people accessing JobKeeper. 5 million workers covered. Job Seeker as well, we know, is hitting records in terms of the sign-up for that unemployment benefit. As for the government's success, interesting tonight, the Prime Minister is going to be meeting with first responder nations, it's called. It was set up by the Austrian leader, Andrew. Quite an eclectic group, the Czech Republic, Israel, Austria, New Zealand, Australia, Greece is among that group. So it's not your G20, but quite an interesting group of countries that are doing relatively well, and the Prime Minister meeting with those leaders again tonight, Andrew.
We're in this position, and it's interesting to hear that list of countries from you, Kieran, and comparing notes, which is how we've ended up with this COVID Safe app, and Britain, for example, are following us on that. Comparing notes is important to speak to like-minded countries who've been able to flatten the curve. Very, very useful in terms of the next steps ahead, because this is unprecedented for governments. Every step you take, as the PM said, you've had a bit of trial and error. He doesn't want stop and go. Certainly some of the states don't want stop and go either. But how long can you shut down the economy like this? The Prime Minister's made it clear those huge amounts going out the door are only really sustainable for 6 months. That's why there's always the fear of the second wave. So we have to get to a situation where we understand that every day lost, you know, thousands of jobs lost. And I'm sure, you know, the Prime Minister very aware of this. And this is the disconnect in National Cabinet. This is the problem you alluded to earlier. The federal government's always blamed for the economy. The state government's always blamed for the health system. So you've got these two things pushing against each other. And it's gone on the health thing. I mean, the original plan was just to make sure there are enough ICU beds. Then we seem to have gone towards elimination, and that's happened geographically in some states. But it's clear now there will always be cases in New South Wales and Victoria, even at low levels. So I think we have to accept that and live with that, and it's time to open things up. Tomorrow's a very important day. The Prime Minister knows he'll get these principles over the line, but can he get an even better result than that?
And the PM has made it pretty clear, and this has been from the get-go, that the advice has been the schools are safe. He's been putting pressure on. I think you'll be encouraged by the fact that New South Wales is moving, the ACT changing its position, thankfully, as well, in terms of schools starting the week after next, because as he has said a number of times, this is an important step, as in his view, I think the most important prerequisite to get the economy moving again. Interestingly, it's been confirmed just how much the banks are helping in loan deferrals, Andrew. $150 billion to $160 billion in terms of loan deferrals across this 6-month period for mortgage holders and for SMEs. So much derided the banks, and I think appropriately during the Royal Commission, but good to see they're stepping up right now.
And Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison deserve full credit for that. That was quick and good thinking to get the banks on board. Their rationale at the time, Kieran, was they have bigger balance sheets. They are able to assist. There's still some criticism of the banks, mind you, in that they haven't deferred interest. So when you start repaying again, you'll have more interest. But they have done the important thing in deferring those mortgage payments and small business payments and business payments and all the rest. A huge amount, as you say, more than $150 billion. You got $200 billion from government. You got $150 billion worth of referrals from banks. That's keeping this economy afloat at the time when you shut it down. That's giving hope on the road to recovery.
And make sure you join us tomorrow on Sky News, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for rolling coverage of the National Cabinet's all-important restriction relief meeting. We'll bring you the Prime Minister, of course, and the Premier's news conferences, stories from business and communities looking to bounce back from the coronavirus shutdown. That's 10 o'clock Eastern tomorrow.